Welcome into Triple Zeros. I am Josh Buckhalter. Follow me on Twitter at JoshGBuck. Hit up the Facebook page at Triple Zeros No Ease. Hit up the website jukesandjumpers.wordpress.com. And of course, the email address is triplezeros@gmail.com. triplezeros@gmail.com. Switching up, of course, we are now on our pivot. We are leading off everything with NBA talk. And the first thing that I think needs to be discussed above and beyond anything else is the fact that Andy Bailey released his top 25 rankings. Now, these factor in the catch-alls, 9 catch-alls, the average rank between 9 catch-alls? I believe it's 9 catch-alls. Andy Bailey's rankings, and at the top of the list, it's kind of looking like the MVP race. And you have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Congratulations on his newborn son, by the way. You had James Harden sitting number 2. LeBron James number 3. Kawhi Leonard sitting at 4. Nikola Jokic at 5. Damian Lillard, Luka Doncic, Jimmy Butler, Rudy Gobert, and Chris Middleton round out the top 10. Now, what's interesting here is, again, this is the average of the catch-all, the Raptor, the box plus minus, the real plus minus, and those kind of, all those statistics. And like I said, it mirrors the MVP race, at least at the very top. You have Harden and you have Giannis. Now, LeBron was my dark horse early on, but with the way the Lakers season has been kind of going a little bit up and down, it seems like they can't really get things keep things on path. Maybe that doesn't hold up to be the case, but Giannis at the very least is sitting at the top pretty handily right now. Harden is a challenger, but I don't think that the Rockets' current status is really helping them any, the way they're kind of struggling themselves, a la the Lakers, to kind of keep things going, despite big performances from Russell Westbrook historically in terms of his career, having a great run efficiency-wise, and they're still losing. Remember, we just saw them coming off of a losing streak when Harden was still scoring, or Harden was not scoring, and they were having trouble winning. So it's not going really well for the Houston Rockets. On top of, they're still dealing with fallout from the Daryl Morey tweet about supporting Hong Kong, in which ultimately cost them around $150 million, the NBA. The ramifications of that are still being trickled out as we come to find out that Tencent, the advertiser over there, the network in China, no longer airs Rockets games. The only mention that you have of anything Rockets related is in James Harden and his standing at the MVP race. It's been rough for Houston this year, and not just on the basketball floor. But getting back to on the court with Giannis sitting there at the top, I just found it interesting that you had Chris Middleton up there, and you had a couple of guys above Anthony Davis. And when you hear a lot of the talk about the Lakers, and it's probably just very amplified casuals who are making these statements, but you hear a lot of talk about how Davis is actually the one who is kind of carrying what the Lakers are doing. I disagree. I mean, obviously LeBron has been a madman this season, but it is interesting to have Davis that far below Chris Middleton, who Middleton missed a lot of time this year. Davis missed about 5 games, but Middleton missed quite some time, an extended amount of time. And then the surprise one at number 11 is Chris Paul. Now, we know Chris Paul ended up out of Houston because of a ceiling clash, or whatever you want to call it, with James Harden there in Houston. But for him to find himself on this list at number 11, no less, just outside of the top 10, and he's on a team with a bunch of a makeshift team, a hodgepodge of characters. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you still got Danilo Gallinari there, Steven Adams, just a mismatch of pieces. And not only are they threatening or not only is he sitting here, but the Thunder are threatening for a playoff spot. So kudos to Chris Paul, a guy who many wrote off as being done. He's showing them exactly what done looks like. If that's done, there's a lot of guys in the NBA who could stand to look like that right now coming into the league, because Chris Paul is managing to do something I don't think anybody thought he was going to do, especially, like I said, with this just a thrown together team. The other surprise, I think, is where you have a guy like Bam Adebayo sitting on the 18th. A couple of other surprises up, rather. Bam Adebayo, Hassan Whiteside is up there. You have, of course, these are averages and catch-alls, and so I guess some of the numbers are a little bit skewed. There's also, it's a whole thread. There's another list where he adds in some net rating on top of that, and it kind of changes up the makeup of it at the top there. But there's pretty much a list of usual suspects, but the biggest takeaway that I had from that was obviously that you do have a very similar list to the MVP race, with Giannis and the beard sitting up at the top. Speaking of awards, you had the weekly awards being announced Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics and Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets win it. Tatum averaged 29.8, 7.5, 3.8, and he had 1.3 blocks, and the Celtics went 4-0 over the past week, while Nikola Jokic, 27.3, 14 boards, and 8 assists, 2 blocks, and the Nuggets went 3-0. Now, Jokic is almost averaging a triple-double this season. I'm surprised he's not getting more MVP talk, more boisterous MVP talk. He's probably got the fringe supporters, but he doesn't really get the loud buzz in Denver, playing that position and looking the way he looks. That's not a diss on him. It's just he does not look like a great basketball player, the great basketball player that he is, and that's a shame. But, you know, towards the end of the season, you have people who are counting and kind of screaming a little bit louder for him to be recognized for what he is as a great player in this league. But right now, it's just he's quietly going about his business. And then Jason Tatum, after having a little bit of a down year last year, resurgence on that Celtics team, and we'll talk about the Celtics in a moment, but good for him because a lot of people were kind of doubting where his ceiling really was on that team that was dealing with a big culture personality and one Kyrie Irving. But that aside, he and a couple of his teammates have been doing a bang-up job for the Boston Celtics this year, having them sitting where they are in the Eastern Conference. Again, though, talk about them in a moment. Other quick news, the Charlotte Hornets bought out Marvin Williams and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist as they are moving forward with their youth movement. Kind of an odd timing because they could have done this beforehand. They don't really have much promising youth, but they got youth. So, you know, go ahead and try and see what happens. Mike's got to figure that out. That is an ugly, ugly situation. It doesn't seem like it's getting any better anytime soon. It's a shame. I know they said that great players don't become great coaches because they often expect the players to be just like them and don't understand why they can't get. I heard an anecdote. Somebody said Kawhi Leonard in like high school or something like that was wondering out loud to his coach, why do they have to play zone defense? Why can't the other guys just stay in front of their man like I do? And when you think about the person saying that, Kawhi Leonard asking, why can't they just do what I do, coach? Kind of in a nutshell tells you exactly why they say that about great players. But ownership, I mean, you can't even tell who's good. Now, obviously, this is a pattern for Mike. You know, he had the Kwame Brown first overall fiasco there in Washington. So I'm not going to say that this is uncharted waters for him, but it's definitely not a good look. So there is that. And then the Eastern Conference, I have to give a quick mea culpa. Some of the let me say this on the surface of mea culpa, but I'm gonna push back on it at the end of it all. 3 teams, the Bucks at the top, really. The Milwaukee Buccaneers, Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics, and the Toronto Raptors. I owe all of them an apology of sorts. The Bucks have lost all of 7 games this year. They are 18-2, I think, like 19-2 in the last 21, something like that. They have 2 losses in 2020, and they have the front runner for the MVP award in Giannis. I'm not sure you really need much more than that, but you know, there it is because they're running roughshod. I said at the beginning of the year I didn't think they were going to be able to. Yeah, they are 19-2 in the last 21. They've only lost 2 games in 2020, so that's incredible. I said in the beginning of the year that they weren't going to be able to maintain the pace, the ferocity, the intensity, the level of play that they had last year, especially when they lost Malcolm Brogdon. So that's something that I have to fess up to. They are proving me wrong so far. Boston Celtics sitting 3rd in the East. They have 3 20-point per game scores. I told you that are kind of alluded to that with the mention of Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown, and Kemba Walker have all combined to, of course, be those 3 20-point per game. And then you have Gordon Hayward floating around 17 there. And I'm a Kyrie fan. I'm a big supporter of Kyrie Irving, and I guess I didn't want to believe it. But Brad Stevens' system seems to really thrive without a true superstar, or without a superstar like Kyrie. Maybe just Kyrie. But it definitely seems to work better when the sum of the parts are better than the individual parts. And they're doing what they're doing. They are, like I said, sitting 3rd in the East, and I don't think you can really argue that they're getting the most out of this group. And despite losses of Kyrie, who was, I guess, an addition by subtraction, maybe, depending on your view of things, but you also lost Al Horford there, and they're still managing to do what they got to do. And they're looking like a team that's trying to find their way back to the Eastern Conference Finals sooner rather than later. Now, they're going to have to deal with this next team because this next team was the one that I was dogging. I mean, dogging all preseason in the Toronto Raptors. This one I sincerely owe an apology to because I had them falling out of the playoffs altogether, losing Kawhi Leonard, and I figured that the rest of those parts weren't enough to have them doing good things, big things in the Eastern Conference again. I felt like they were due for a letdown after the magical run that they had last year. Well, all they have done is win 15 straight. They are sitting second in the East, and they have 3 losses in 2020. We already know about what Pascal Siakam has done. Kyle Lowry is an all-star this year. Nick Nurse has done a hell of a job. The team just plays great defense. They're a scrappy team. Fred VanVleet, hopefully the Bulls throw some money at him in this offseason. Just putting that out there. Talk about them in a moment. But yeah, I had to give the Raptors some much love because I was clowning them. I mean, and not disrespectful, just I that much respect to what Kawhi brought. Did not see. I missed the forest for the tree, I guess you could say. And they are showing that they are a very dense forest. And again, kudos to Nick Nurse for keeping this team on track and for continuing to develop Pascal Siakam, an all-star this year, and for Kyle Lowry for just continuing to do what he does, which is all the little things for a team that makes a team run that don't really get appreciated unless you're really paying attention to all the secondary, the defense, the extra passing, and that kind of thing. Even jawing at the ref is something that kind of annoys me at times, but it's very valuable because it does alert the ref to be on the lookout for certain things in the future. So I can't really knock the value of a player trying to get a referee to necessarily look for something going forward. So there is that. And then wrapping up the NBA section, talk about, of course, the hometown Chicago Bulls. Have to bring it up because they made some news. They're still talking about playoffs, even though they are sitting at 6-14 this year, in the year 2020. Now, I'm not even worried about what they did. I mean, we're worried about it in the grand scheme, but just addressing what they've done so far in what's supposed to be the new beginning term. And 6-14 in 2020 is not good. They've lost 5 in a row. And rumor has it, reports are that changes are coming after this season. Something similar to what's going on the South Side. They're going to be moving John Paxson to an advisory role, such as they did with Kenny Williams with the White Sox. As you know, Jerry Reinsdorf owns both teams. And all I can really say about that is I believe it when I see it first. And second of all, how far away is he? I do think that they have some experience with this. Again, with the Kenny Williams move, it's very similar with Paxson. 2 guys who are very strong-willed and whose strong will has kind of been a detriment because they try to build it in their vision and they refuse to see that their vision is not necessarily current. It's really kind of stuck in the era from which they played. So that is what it is. They can still be in advisory roles. They've already kind of moved Gar Forman to a scouting role. Maybe he gets that title officially now. Who they bring in definitely matters. But I just think that I have to believe it when I see it. Because there's been a lot of talk. And then they find a way to believe in themselves again and find some kind of solace in things. And now they're going to be rumored to be getting players back. The injured guys, Otto Porter, Wendell, Lowry. And you have to kind of feel like, okay, you're going to get a chance to see what they are. They're not going to be tanking because you can't, these guys do need to learn to win at some point. So you can't keep trying to lose and praying for draft picks, especially now. You're not going to get a good enough draft pick to make a difference. So you have to just kind of keep the focus on trying to develop the guys and trying to win. So they're kind of locked themselves into this, which is probably why the mantra hasn't really wavered. They kind of knew that. There was no way for them to kind of say it out loud. It's like, look, we are what we are without demoralizing the fan base to a certain extent, but they have been losing some kind of revenue with ticket sales. It's been less and less capacity, the lowest they've been in quite some time, but again, they probably anticipated a lot of this because they probably looked at it and saw behind closed doors. Despite what they tell us, they have to have recognized that this roster was flawed. And then when the injuries started piling up, they had to acknowledge that they weren't going to go where they were hoping they would go. Now, where they are on Boylan remains to be seen, but I would have to imagine that if they are ready to move Paxson over, they are ready to admit that Boylan is not necessarily the guy. And I would go even further to say definitely not the guy. That being said, one player on the roster should be getting more love than he is getting. That is Zach LaVine. Talked about him a couple of episodes ago when he was getting snubbed for the All-Star game when that first dropped out, that he didn't get picked and then did not get picked for reserves. And it's in the host city. Then the story was, will he do the dunk contest? He decided to not do the dunk contest, but instead do the three-point contest, which I kind of get. Control your narrative. Show them that you are a little bit more versatile. Would like to see him in the skills competition, especially because they're not going to put him in the All-Star game. Show some of that passing ability, some accuracy, some creativity, I guess, some flashiness. I don't know. But I get doing the three-point contest. Save your legs a little bit, and definitely try to show them something other than, get them talking about something other than your athleticism. That is one good thing for him. But On top of that, he did not make the preliminary roster for the Olympics. Now, he's not going to make the roster anyway, but to still not make the preliminary, there is a definite bias against him right now in the NBA, and it's got to be because he's attached to the Bulls, a losing roster. Now, we know that there are players who are on losing rosters making all-star teams. Trae Young, who is fourth in scoring, I believe, at 29 points per game, but he did not make the Olympic roster, so it's not necessarily that. But Zach, I think a lot of times, I talked about him not making the FIBA roster, that the experience is good for these players, and for him not to get that kind of exposure, I think, is a detriment, and a lot of why the perception of him is that he's one-dimensional. Well, he's not great in a lot of other dimensions aside from scoring, but he's definitely a contributor in defense. He will get in passing lanes and disrupt those kind of things. Now, he does have some mental lapses, but again, you got to take some good with some bad in cases like this. He's I think, close to being prolific scorer. If he could just cut down on some of those bad shots, then I think it would be a lot better. But he's having a really good year. In fact, he's averaging 25, 4, 8, and 4, and he's one of only 10 players in 2020 to have that stat line. Did not make an all-star team. Is not on the preliminary Olympics roster. 1 of 10 this season to have that stat line. Just wanted to put that out there. That's a travesty, something that needs to be rectified, and hopefully they do. I think I'm going to have to put something up about that on Pimpin' Ain't Easy. You can always follow the Bull stuff there, pimpinainteasy.com. Going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to discuss what's going on in the NFL. A couple of quick notes before we wrap up this episode to give you a preview of what's coming up on the next episode. Triple Zeros. Be right back. Back now on Triple Zeros, and I am Josh Buckhalter. Again, follow me on Twitter at JoshGBuck. Hit up the Facebook page at Triple Zeros No Ease. Hit up the website jukesandjumpers.wordpress.com, and the email address is triplezerosnoease@gmail.com. triplezerosnoease@gmail.com. Again, switching gears to the NFL, and a couple of quick notes. First and foremost, Phillip Rivers has announced that he and the Chargers have mutually agreed to part ways. I say that in air quotes because, as we know, that just means that they will be releasing him, won't be resigning him, don't want him back. He gone. Now, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. It's not really a surprise here because Rivers did move to Florida, and that has led to speculation where he's going to land. But he leaves L.A. with over 59,000 passing yards, a franchise record, 397 passing touchdowns, a franchise record, led the team to 123 wins. He is an 8-time Pro Bowler, 224 straight starts, no missed, and he is a 2013 NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Now, what's crazy about this is, just had Eli Manning retire. You just had Ben Roethlisberger miss the entire year basically with his injured elbow, and Rivers now be on his way to a new team. Manning won't be back next year, and the only one who'll be back will be Ben Roethlisberger, and it's just crazy how fast time flies. And you have to wonder, one of those things you have to go back and wonder if that draft had shaken out the way it originally plotted. If you remember, Eli Manning was actually taken by the Chargers, but did not want to play for the Chargers. Orchestrated a trade between the Chargers ended up with Rivers, who the Giants selected, and the rest is history. But if you redrafted, you probably would take it Ben first, and then Rivers, and then Eli, based on individual careers. And I think that would maybe make things look a little bit different. Maybe the Chargers have a couple of Super Bowls, and maybe the Giants end up with an appearance because of Rivers, and then the Steelers. Who knows? Who knows how that all works out? Maybe the Chargers get nothing, and the Steelers still win there too because it's the Steelers. Who knows? But it is an interesting juxtaposition when you have Eli stepping away, Phillip Rivers moving on to new pastures, and you have Ben Roethlisberger set to return after a lengthy absence due to injury. Now, Phillip Rivers leads us into an ESPN piece by Bill Barnwell, where it's an interactive offseason predictor, and there's a lot of scenarios based on the player that you select and what's going to fall out. And Rivers is one of them, and where he might wind up. But I use that to segue into mention of Tom Brady. And as you know, Tom Brady has been a lot of chatter because he did the ad where he can't tell if he's walking in or walking out of Gillette Stadium. He moved out of his house in the Boston area and is moving to New York, and he's been linked to the Raiders, to the Chargers, to the 49ers, to the Florida teams, even to my Chicago Bears. And that was one of the options on Barnwell's predictor, Brady to the Bears, and that set up a whole other mess of options. And while I get it, I don't see why he would leave New England to come to a Bears team that still needs an offensive line and has so many other issues and they would still have to find a way to get the money to pay him, which means they're going to get rid of some things. Now, there's that would still leave a lot of the infrastructure in place for him to be successful here, and I wouldn't rule it out completely, but it just seems like there are better options for him in terms of being able to go someplace like the Chargers. Now, their offensive line is bad. They have no protection, and it's not going to get much better next year. So that's a reason to rule him out. But I could see him going to the Raiders. I'm a fan of him going to the Raiders. I like that offensive line. They're big, and they're nasty, and he's got a great running game, and a coach in John Gruden who knows how to use veteran quarterbacks, and I think that would be one. The West Coast short passing game, being accurate, being on time. Just listen, Brady to the Raiders 2020. And if that happens, I might just have to go with them. Vegas Raiders, baby, just win. I don't know how else to look at it, but I just don't see him coming to the Bears, Tom, that is. Now, the other thing about the scenario, the offseason predictor, was that a lot of them are kind of just domino pieces where, well, if he signs here, then this guy who plays the same position could sign here. Not necessarily go to the team that guy vacated just because he sets the market for the contract. So when you're looking through it, realize that I was browsing through it, and at some point I was like, wait a minute, why would they do this? And I had to go back and realize that it was more or less him just saying that he would set the market and then the next guy would get a contract and so on and so forth. But the Bears one, and again, there were many players mentioned, and the only one the Bears were linked to was Brady, but you had Cam Newton up there, you had Rivers up there, you had running back in Melvin Gordon, you had a receiver in A.J. Green, you had a left tackle in Trent Williams, and the only one they attached the Bears to was Brady, which I think is kind of short-changing. I think the Bears would be kicking the tires on Cam Newton as well. I don't know, but I would like to think so. I think Cam Newton stylistically fits what the Bears want to do a little bit better, and I think because the market for him could be suppressed because there's not a lot of people who are openly in support of Cam and what he brings to the table, but probably are, and I can see that driving the price up. But I think that he would be a good, bare minimum, he's a good name to bring in to push Mitch, but I think he wins that job, and I think that if you bring anybody else in, there's a good chance that they win the job as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the Bears are any better for it. I think if Cam comes in and wins that job, that means the Bears are better for it, because that means he's healthy, and that means that he's better than Mitchell Trubisky in that case. Other Bears rumors: former NFLer Dan Saleo got on the Twitter machine and got to talking about on the radio and talking about how the Bears are shopping Khalil Mack, connected them to the Bengals and the Redskins as possible partners, and trying to move up to snag one of those top picks. Now, if he goes to get two, and they're going for a quarterback, they are going to probably miss the boat again. If they go for 2, they are connecting pundits are connecting them to Tua Talk. We'll talk about him in a moment. That's way too high for Tua. Don't do him another Trubisky trying to right your wrong. 2 wrongs definitely don't make it right. You're going to set the organization back multiple years. And if you don't get 1, which is the Bengals pick, there's no sense in doing it, because I'm not sure why else you'd be moving on from a player like Mac. Now, he talked about compensation being 2 1s, a 1, a couple of 2s and a 3, or a 1 or 2 and some kind of combination of the 3s and somewhere thereabouts. But first of all, they're going to eat a massive amount of cap if they are to move Mac. They just re-signed him. Just even with the restructure, they're going to eat a lot of money trying to move him in any kind of deal. Secondly, again, like I just said, if you're not moving him to number 1, then you're really just wasting your time, because moving him 2 for Chase Young for cap space is the ultimate penny pincher move. No matter how good Chase Young is, it is just a penny pincher's move, and it looks really bad, and you're still eating cap. So I'm not sure how much you're actually going to end up saving when all is said and done. But on top of that, there's also zero corroboration. This is a rumor. This is an unfounded rumor that has really no basis for reality. Again, unless they go and get 1, which I don't see why the Bengals would pass up their chance. Of course, it's the Bengals, so I can't rule anything out with them. But I don't see why they would pass that up to go and get anybody else other than Joe Burrow and make that happen. So, one of the other things I would mention with the Bears and the Brady connection was that they could also bring in a Josh Rosen as apprentice, which actually, like in that scenario, that actually works out. If they're going to bring in Brady and then bring in Rosen to back him up and learn from him for a couple years, I'm all for that, but I still don't see Brady coming. I think Brady's best bet is to go to Oakland to Vegas, because that's where I want him to go. So, point blank period. that's where he needs to be. Other news, Monday Night Football is rumored or is reportedly going to be open to flex scheduling coming in 2023. That is per Sports Business Journal. Again, that is in 2023, where they'll be able to take games and flex them in Monday night, because those games would also then be moving to ABC, which would bring in a lot of new viewership, I would imagine, because of the accessibility of the broadcast network. Myles Garrett met with Roger Goodell. We'll see how that turns out, but as we all know, he's been out and was suspended indefinitely after bopping Mason Rudolph on top of the head with a helmet. See how that all works out for him there. But he did meet with Roger Goodell, so that is, I guess, it has to be a positive step, a positive move for him, because I don't think that he wants to sit out any more time than he already has to. And then in some interesting news, Russell Wilson was spotted rocking a new hairdo, and if you haven't had a chance, there's too many to put up. So go to Twitter, look up Russell Wilson hairdo, and you can see the thread of the Razor Ramon. They got him looking like Michael Jackson on the Thriller cover. They got him looking like Prince in Purple Rain. They did my man dirty, and he did it to himself. Razor Ramon's my favorite though. It's Russ. Russ got the relaxer in. He got it straight back. But now we've been seeing Russ going a little bit reckless with the hairdos for a couple of weeks now. He had the straight back move where he looked like Billy D. Williams, and now he's got it kind of waved off. Russ is doing a little bit of everything. He living. I'm not even mad at him. Russ is living his life. And then wrapping up the NFL section, Tua Tagovailoa update. NFL Network reported Monday that, citing sources, his 3-month CT scan on his hip was, quote, as positive as possible. His hip fracture has healed, and the range of motion is good, according to the report. It's likely, quote, okay, it's another quote, it'll likely be another month before he's clear for football activities. The report also stated on Tagovailoa's hip that was dislocated and suffered a posterior wall fracture in mid-November. Good for him. Still don't think that 2 is the right spot to be taken if they're moving up. And if they're moving Mac, you better be moving heaven and earth to get to number 1 to go get Joe Burrow. It's only makes sense. Period. And on top of that, they mentioned that they'd have to add in some extra picks, and that right there was the end of the deal. Any more first-round picks, and Brian Pace would be walked out of the stadium, walked out of Chicago immediately, because I don't think anybody in Chicago was trying to hear any of that madness there. That is going to do it for this episode of Triple Zeros. Please follow me on Twitter at Josh G. Buck. Hit up the Facebook page at Triple Zeros No E's. Hit up the website jukesandjumpers.wordpress.com, and of course the email address is triplezeros@gmail.com. Triple Zeros No E's at gmail.com. And until the very, check out the reading. Read the stuff. Last Word on Pro Football. Read the stuff. PippinAin'tEasy.com. And of course, the blog is jukesanddumpers.wordpress.com. You can also find the podcast there. You can find the YouTube. Hit the YouTube, like, subscribe, all those things as well. And of course, until the very next time, I'm your host, Josh Buckhalter. You know what to do. Is that the horn?